wonderful day on this Friday. God is truly, truly awesome and worthy to be praised. Amen. We're excited today to say we exercise our right to vote and as a proud Democrat, and we look forward to seeing Democrats all across this country step up and accept the charge that it's time that we speak louder. It's time that we have collective thoughts of a unified agenda and plan to reverse the course of this Trumpism fear season that we in. And today I'm just pleased again to see as we were able to get out on this beautiful day, First Lady and I, and exercise our right to vote. Today our commentary will be exploring juvenile justice reform and the impact on communities of color and low income families. Amen. We want you to know that juvenile justice reform has become a critical issue in the United States, especially as it relates to the impact on communities of color and low income families. The current system often disappropriately affects these groups, leading to long-term consequences that extends beyond the courtroom. We will share with you today as we explore the different approaches taken by Democrats and Republicans on juvenile justice reform, highlighting how these policies affects vulnerable populations. It also introduces me, Mike Middlebrook, a proud Democrat running for state representative in District 34, Mississippi County, Arkansas, who will support meaningful reform. I think it's important that we make that note, meaningful reform. As we share with you our personal opinion on the new juvenile justice reform proposal that's been pushed by the Republican Party, the first sign of trouble here for me is it's only endorsed by Republicans. And when you look at who is fighting for the people, who's trying to create access, who's trying to create unity and true reform for all citizens and stakeholders. Again, as a proud Democrat, I'm looking forward on working on legislations to restore the voting rights back to ex-felons who've paid their debt to society. And in my mind and my heart and my spirit, I'm just thinking about this reform that's proposed. How will it affect our young people who are future voters? How do we restore them to full citizenship rather than laying labels and tags on them as juveniles that will affect their adult life and participating in the process of unity and voting in America? So today there will be an eye-level view of our approach and our commentary from a Democrat perspective and a Republican perspective. The current state of juvenile justice and its disparities. The juvenile system was originally designed to rehabilitate young offenders rather than punish them harshly. However, in many children from communities of color and poor families face harsher treatment. Studies show that Black and Hispanic youth are more likely to be arrested, detained, and sentenced to juvenile facilities compared to their white counterparts for similar offenses. This disparity contributes to a cycle of poverty, incarceration that is difficult to break. Again, this follows you from being a juvenile all the way into your adulthood. For example, in Arkansas, data reveals that Black youths are detained at a rate nearly 3 times higher than white youths. This imbalance is often linked to systemic issues such as poverty, lack of access to quality education, and community resources. We want you to understand the democratic approach to juvenile justice reform. Democrats generally advocate for reform that focuses on rehabilitation, prevention, and addressing the root cause of juvenile delinquency. Their approaches includes reducing the use of detention for nonviolent offenders, especially for youth from marginalized communities, investing in community-based programming that provides education, mental health services, and family support, eliminating mandatory minimum sentences for juveniles to allow judges more discretion, addressing racial disparities through training and oversight and data transparency. That's one of the issues I have with this new proposal on juvenile reform. Will there be transparency? Their goal is to take this from a judge making a decision to creating a panel who decide the level of punishment, the level of reform, the level of sentencing, and will this be done in a fair way? So again, we're creating another level of bureaucracy that allows a particular party to sway how the juvenile reform program is brought together, rather than it being a nonpartisan where you see participation on both sides. My concern is if we create a third entity to decide the future of our youth and our juvenile children, what will happen to the people of color who are, again, 3 times more likely in Arkansas and Mississippi County to be detained? Again, we're creating an opportunity for there to be partisan decisions based on your background, where you're from, and this is what they're saying, based on your background, based on your surroundings, based on issues that has really nothing to do with the offense that was created. And even if it was, when you're dealing with our juveniles, justice should be done from a perspective of grace and love. Together, we can figure out a way to better reform our juvenile process. Mike Middlebrook supports these reforms, emphasizing that young people deserve a second chance. I believe that investing in prevention and rehabilitation will reduce the opportunity of kids being reintroduced to crime and reintroduced back into the system, and help build stronger communities in Mississippi County. The Republican perspective on juvenile justice reform. Republicans tend to emphasize on accountability and public safety in their approach to juvenile justice. Their policies often focus on maintaining stricter penalties for serious juvenile offenders to deter crime, supporting law enforcement and judicial discretion to ensure swift consequences, encouraging programs that combine discipline with rehabilitation, such as boot camps and stricter environments. I mean, if you look at history from our juvenile detention centers into our penitentiary system, the history in Arkansas of privatizing state prison systems, and even now the private prison systems basically becoming another form of sharecropping and indentured servitude. They're more about labor and pushing an agenda that makes the prison system and the juvenile system a profitable business, rather than investing more into our juveniles. So when they come back into the system, they have some trainings, they have mentors, there are programs in the neighborhood to help re-include them and reactivate a consciousness in them that wants to participate in the system. They prioritizing victims' rights and community protections over reforming, rehabilitating, and providing resources for our juveniles, promoting parental responsibility. In other words, making the parents responsible for the deeds of their children. Yes, we want our parents to be responsible and insightful, raising your kids with good spiritual values and just do what's right. But your parents shouldn't be held responsible for the misdeeds of a juvenile unless you participated in the offense. The Republicans are pushing to hold the parents accountable. While Republicans acknowledge the need for reform, they often argue that public safety must remain a top priority. They stress that consequences for juvenile crime should be clear, consistent to prevent repeat offenses. Often these offenses and positions affect communities of color and low-income families. We want to stress that. The contrasting approaches have real-world effects on vulnerable populations. The Democrats focus on rehabilitation and reducing detention can help break the cycle of incarceration and the disparities and disappropriate effects on our children and youth of color and those from low-income backgrounds. By providing support and services and as an alternative to detention, these reforms aim to address underlying issues such as trauma, poverty, and the lack of opportunities. And these causes are often overlooked. Rather than setting a value and a punishment on a child's atmosphere in low-income background and impoverished neighborhoods, you're looking at it from the perspective of the trauma that's been instilled in that child because of poverty and lack of opportunity. On the other hand, the Republicans emphasize on accountability and stricter penalties can sometimes lead to higher detention rates for minor youth and minor offenses, especially in areas where systemic bias exists. Again, in the South and the Delta, there's documented proof of systemic biases when it comes to determining accountability and determining the length of sentencing for people of color and from poor communities. We want you to understand why public safety is important. It's critical. We argue that this approach may prejudge and be very difficult on those from impoverished communities that face disparities and fails to address the root cause of juvenile crime. We must first look at the root cause: lack of opportunity, lack of access, lack of investments. Examples of reform in action. Several states have implemented reforms that reflect these different philosophies. For instance, California has expanded community-based programs and reduced juvenile detention, resulting in lower reintegration into the juvenile detention services because of opportunities that are given to our young people. Whereas Texas has maintained a tougher penalty course, but introduced programs that combine discipline with education and mental health support. Whereas here in Arkansas, is currently debating reforms that will reduce mandatory detention and increase funding for preventative programs. But again, we must look, they're adding another layer to the final decision and taking it from the courts and the judge and going to allow a separate body to decide the level of penalty, the level of infraction, the time spent in juvenile detention, and that concerns me. Who's going to be on this panel? Are they going to be conservatives that are looking at a narrow way to separate the poor from the rich, the people of color from those of European backgrounds, from ones who may have grew up in a poor neighborhood to ones who grew up in an affluent neighborhood, as a statute to decide how you impose penalty and reform? I'm very concerned about that. For that reason, I'm not in favor of the common legislation for juvenile justice reform. Yes, I think there needs to be reform, but it needs to be done by a bipartisan group rather than by just the Republicans. So we are sure that the biases that have existed in the past, the non-language that's introduced into a system when you allow partisan politics to decide the penalties, how will that affect people of color? How will that affect the long-term stability of our marginalized communities, when in some cases our young people of color will be assigned a tag that may last a lifetime, that they may not be able to recover from in their adulthood, which again, restricting their right to participate in the political process. So we should be very concerned about the road and the message coming from the Republican Party about juvenile justice reform. Dig deeper. Ask your state representative, how will this board be created? Will there be a balance, nonpartisan, with people of faith and values from all communities deciding on the reform that's practical for impoverished community and in an area where opportunities are lacking? As your next step representative, your next state representative, if I'm blessed to earn your vote and win the seat of state representative, I will be a strong advocate for all juveniles. I will be a strong advocate for our adults who are caught up in the legal system. I believe strong-heartedly, just as we should reform and create opportunities for our youth, we should do the same for our adults. We need justice reform on all levels. We need to restore the right to vote to every man and woman who has paid their debt back to society. If you want reform, restore people to full citizenship rather than keeping them at a 2/3 as a citizen by denying a lifetime of the right to vote. So there's ways to reform the justice system, but the Republican Party is not ready to have that discussion. I believe they're constantly looking for ways to delete the vote and stop the marginalized in this country from speaking loudly. And not only does this affect our adults, but it'll affect our youth. Ask the right questions. Dig deeper. Moving forward, what communities can do as we wrap this up. Engaging with local representatives to express support for fair policies. Supporting organizations that provide service to at-risk youth. Promoting awareness about the impact of juvenile justice disparities, where the balance of justice is not the same in one community versus the other. Where our concern is our children being treated with the respect and dignity that all citizens and all juveniles deserve, or you just deciding because they're from a poor neighborhood, because they have had minor offenses that are deeply rooted into systemic trauma from lack of opportunity, lack of services, lack of investment. promoting awareness about the impact of juvenile justice disparities, encouraging youth participation in community programs and decision makers. That's why Unity for Success and Team Middlebrooks is creating opportunities to meet with our young people as we continue to find ways to connect with our youth and to connect with our adults. These are the discussions we're prepared to have. As we move forward, I will be opening up my commentaries to allow comment and feedback. Even today, you can reach me on any of my Facebook pages, on my website, teammiddlebrooks2026.com. You can reach us on our email, teammiddlebrooks2026@gmail.com. So if you have a comment or a question about my position on the issue, if you would like to add feedback, feel welcome. If you would like to invite us to your churches, to your community groups, amen, to small gatherings in the community, to discuss our positions on issues, we're more than welcoming any invites. We look forward to expounding and sharing more about our positions on the issues that affect Mississippi County and the state of Arkansas. Thank you for listening. Have a blessed day. Think about our youth as you prepare to cast your vote in early voting and in the primary elections. Ask the right questions. It should be more about a candidate's positions on policies that matters to you than on personalities. This election in November comes down to one main issue. My opponent is a Republican that supports the Republican agenda 90% of the time. I am a Democrat that supports the Democrat agenda, and I will say 99% of the time. I'll be willing to work with independents and Republicans to find ways to unify and correct some of the laws and directions we're going in that are so hurting our marginalized community, our working class, and our poor. This is my community. We grew up here, lifelong residents, now 7 generations in Mississippi County. I promise you, I will always fight for the least of thee, my brother. I promise you, I will try to be my brothers and sisters' keeper. I promise you, I will stand for right, speak boldly. I will compromise. We will find bridges to work together. But if it's something that's going to take resources and opportunities, investment from our youth and from our marginalized community, it will be a strong no from Mike Middlebrook. Have a blessed day.